Just $20,000? For your eldest son's wedding, that's all? My son, whom I cherished more than my own life, spoke with a sneer. If you're a parent, you should pay the whole amount, you poor thing. Is this really my son? After divorcing my ex-husband who was a harmful drunkard, I remarried Benjamin and have been living happily as a family of 3. Kind and gentle Benjamin warmly and strictly raised my son, Mateo, who was not his biological child. They were the very picture of a loving father and son. Mateo grew up to be a kind young man and successfully became an independent adult. Living as a couple again after our son moved out felt refreshingly new. In the midst of our peaceful life, suddenly, our son contacted us to say, "I got married." The news came so suddenly, and it was all after the fact. I was surprised, but I accepted it, considering he's an adult. The bride he brought home seems to be from a wealthy family. However, what concerns me isn't her background. To put it nicely, she's a person who can speak her mind without fear. To put it poorly, she's insensitive and can blurt out rude remarks without a second thought. Could her personality have influenced my son? To my knowledge, Mateo was never someone who acted so arrogant when others would supported him financially. He wouldn't disdain his parents by calling them poor. I was left in shock and disbelief. Is this really my son in front of me? I almost wish someone would tell me he's just a stranger who happens to look like my son. Just then, there was a loud bang on the table, and my usually calm husband, Benjamin, who never raised his voice, exploded in anger.
Shut up, boy!
In his eyes, I saw a level of contempt and anger I had never seen before. I, Mila, got married at the age of 25. Soon after the wedding, I had a child and became a full-time homemaker, raising my child. I divorced my first husband when our son, Mateo, was just 1 year old.
It's Mila's fault for making me angry. Enough already.
He was a man who would berate me when drunk, throwing things around the house, punching and kicking. His bad drinking habit seemed to worsen with each day, and he appeared to be increasingly intolerant to alcohol. In addition to shouting loudly, he would throw objects to further intimidate me, occasionally hitting me and causing injuries. Even then, he would say, "Can't you even dodge, you slowpoke? It's not my fault." Once, he threw a glass at me while I was holding Mateo. I instinctively shielded my son. The glass hit my temple, breaking and causing bleeding. That was when I decided to divorce. If this continued, Mateo might get hurt someday. My ex-husband's drinking problem was only getting worse, and it was possible that something life-threatening might happen. I was determined to protect my son, but if something happened to me and we were still married, this man would become Mateo's guardian. Could I let such a man, who had injured me and might do something even more dangerous, be responsible for him? This was a dreadful scenario I absolutely had to avoid. So, I ran to a hospital that was open at night, blood streaming from my temple, carrying Mateo in my arms, and got a medical report. I also explained my situation to the hospital staff, who then contacted the authorities. This way, Mateo and I were recognized as victims of abuse, and we successfully involved a third party between me and my ex-husband. My ex-husband was very good at keeping up appearances, especially around others, except for me and our son. Even more so when he was sober. That's why having a third party involved was absolutely necessary. Soon after, the divorce was finalized. My ex-husband's last words were about how he felt neglected by me, Mila, after our son Mateo was born, but it was just more of his self-centeredness. In reality, although we had arranged for alimony and child support, he only made the initial payment. It was only a few $100s, and after that, the payments stopped. At first, I tried to demand the payments, but he either evaded or reacted aggressively, so I gave up. I never had any expectations from him. After deciding to divorce, I reached out to the company I worked for before my pregnancy, explained my situation, and asked if they would rehire me. Fortunately, they did, so I had a stable income, though modest. What mattered most was Mateo's well-being and my ability to work healthily. I thought it best to eliminate any stress. It's you, Mila, and Mateo that I want to spend my life with. The person who stood by me during those desperate days was Benjamin, who had joined the company as a fresh graduate after I resigned. He was 4 years younger than me. In his mid-20s at the time. I couldn't believe that such a young man would say such things to a divorced, single mother like me. I want to date you, Mila, but I also want to get married soon. You shouldn't talk about marriage so lightly. Initially, I couldn't trust Benjamin. I thought maybe his youth and a romanticized idea of marriage made him speak without thinking. As someone who had already failed at marriage once, it was a word I didn't really want to hear. If we get married, we can always be together and share the responsibilities of taking care of Matteo and the household. Plus, to truly become Matteo's father, I need to marry you first. Is it to become Matteo's father? Of course, I love you, Mila, but I think of marrying both you and Matteo. I was speechless. I had never imagined he would think in such a way. Could he really be serious about this? I'll take the same responsibility for Matteo as you do. I think that's part of being close to you, Mila. I want to be part of the team, Benjamin said with a warm smile. It made my frozen heart start to thaw. Benjamin always considered Matteo and me as a package. He never just asked me out for dinner after work. Instead, he'd offer to help with shopping and even carry groceries to our apartment. Recently, when I had to leave work early because I wasn't feeling well, he offered to pick up Matteo from daycare and even brought dinner for us. Matteo had grown quite fond of Benjamin, and seeing the two of them laughing together made me happy. By marrying, I gain a lot of rights. I can become a husband, a father, a family member. So, please marry me, for my sake. I knew he phrased it that way to not burden me, but his words made me very happy. When Matteo turned 3, Matteo and I decided to remarry, this time to Benjamin. Though there was no blood relation, Benjamin and Matteo were a close father and son. We never told Matteo that he wasn't biologically related to Benjamin. It wasn't about keeping it a secret. It just never seemed necessary or the right time to say anything. After all, they were undeniably father and son. Benjamin provided both kindness and discipline to Matteo. With both of us working, we gained some financial stability and even managed to build a respectable house, though not a mansion. Matteo grew up healthy, went to college, and now works and lives independently. Currently, Benjamin and I live together in this house, just the two of us. It feels a bit strange to be living as a couple again after all this time, but we're enjoying our peaceful life together. It had been a few years since Matteo became a working adult when one day, out of the blue, we received a call from him. I got married. I'll bring my wife over this weekend. It was a complete shock. I hadn't even heard he was seeing someone, and now he was already married. They were still planning their wedding ceremony and would set a date once everything was arranged. Well, he's an adult now, and as long as he takes responsibility for his decisions, that's fine. But still, I was taken aback by the fact that he had married without any prior notice. I wondered if there was a pressing reason like pregnancy, but that wasn't the case. My son Matteo had always been a bright and kind boy. There was a bit of a rebellious phase, but he was always able to reflect on his actions, so he never really behaved terribly. We never had a cold relationship in our family, and even after becoming independent, he frequently visited home, joining us for meals just like before. That's why Benjamin and I were puzzled by this sudden announcement of his marriage. Welcome back, Matteo. Thanks, Mom. This is Grace, my wife. Matteo brought his wife home on the weekend. The woman named Grace standing next to him smiled gently and bowed slightly. She was slender, demure, and I genuinely thought she was very beautiful. Please come in. When I invited Matteo and his wife Grace inside, they nodded and followed Benjamin through the hallway. I naturally followed them at the rear and then. Grace was looking around the house curiously, glancing everywhere, her gaze darting to the stairs and closed doors. Even after entering the living room, her behavior didn't change. Her obvious scrutiny of our home felt both peculiar and somewhat unpleasant, raising questions about what kind of person she was. Her unabashed staring around our home was puzzling and as much a cause for discomfort as it was for growing curiosity. I couldn't help but wonder, what kind of person is this young lady? As we sat opposite each other at the dining table, ready to talk, Matteo explained that Grace was 2 years younger than him and had joined his company this spring. She must be around 25, perhaps having changed jobs. Grace's parents were chairpersons of a well-known company, and she grew up in a wealthy household with housekeepers always present to take care of everything. All these details were shared by Matteo, while Grace sat quietly beside him, not saying a word. Coffee or tea, which would you prefer? What kind of work do you do at the company? I hear you're planning a wedding. Do you have any particular preferences for it? Even when asked these questions, Grace would whisper in Matteo's ear, covering her mouth with a handkerchief, and he would answer on her behalf. Grace just smiled and narrowed her eyes, making the situation rather awkward. It all felt quite circuitous and cumbersome. "Grace, I know it's our first meeting and you might be reserved, but you don't have to hold back. Just say whatever you want." Benjamin probably felt the same way. He said this as if he was running out of patience, but Grace continued to cover her mouth and only smiled with her eyes. Even after that, Mateo spoke on her behalf. They left early, saying, "We just came to report today." In the end, we never heard Grace's voice. What to say? Yes, indeed. After they left, Benjamin and I could only exchange such words, looking at each other. Is this how young people are these days? No, the new recruits at the company aren't like this. Not introducing oneself, not making proper eye contact, not uttering a word of greeting or thanks. Yet, she unabashedly looked around our home and didn't say any words of gratitude or seem concerned about the parting gift we gave. It was really strange. Almost like encountering a new kind of human. The sense of unease was significant. Now that they're married, they're their own family, so as long as Mateo and Grace do well together, that's enough. I agree, a moderate relationship seems just right. Benjamin probably felt the same. He said this with a wry smile. We neither desired to live together nor had any grand expectations about the mindset of being a wife. So, I thought it would be best if we just met on occasion. That was my thought, but, for some unknown reason, Mateo and Grace began visiting frequently. They didn't live far, so it was easy for them to stop by. But Grace still wouldn't speak a word. She would whisper to Mateo, who then answered for her. Their visits became more frequent, often staying for dinner or overnight. Which honestly felt stressful. Today, while I was preparing dinner, Mateo texted, "We're coming over." It was about dinner time, so I naturally asked if they would stay for dinner, and he replied, "Yes, we'll eat." When they arrived, they went straight to Mateo's room upstairs, not offering to help. Mateo used to help with meal preparations, but that's no longer the case. Which is both sad and disappointing. I'll go call Mateo and Grace for dinner. After Benjamin helped me finish preparing dinner, I decided to go upstairs to call the two of them down. Really, what to think of this? I mused as I went upstairs. I heard a voice that wasn't Mateo's, a woman's voice I had never heard before. It had to be Grace. It was the first time I heard her speak. Isn't this house too old? Is it secondhand? No, it's not. Your father-in-law and mother-in-law are not impressive. The house and the people have this poor vibe that's depressing. My first thought was, so this is her true nature. I was infuriated by her disrespectful tone and mocking voice, but it felt like the discomfort I had been feeling deep down had finally been revealed. If you don't cut ties with this old-fashioned family, it's divorce, you know? I'll think about it. Later, I waited for the right moment to call them down for dinner. The four of us spent a lackluster meal together, and Mateo and Grace left as soon as they finished eating. I'm disappointed in Grace's personality and Mateo's lack of discernment. Yeah. I'm most angry that Mateo said he'd think about it when Grace threatened divorce if he doesn't cut ties. I shared all of this with Benjamin as we drank coffee after dinner. I was upset at Grace for casually bringing up divorce and at Mateo for even considering abandoning his parents and home. Calm down a bit. Benjamin soothed me as my anger grew over time. Prioritizing his wife isn't a bad thing for a husband to do. I know, but still. They're still young, probably can't see beyond themselves. Let's just watch for a while. Indeed, they are newlyweds. Grace is young and was probably brought up very pampered. I'm disappointed that Mateo chose someone like her, but ultimately, it's his life. It's okay. Mateo's life is his own. After all, even though we're family, we are different people, and it wouldn't be strange if our paths diverged. That's an extreme view, but if it comes to that, there's nothing we can do. Mateo is a kind guy at heart, and he might just find a way to balance between Grace and us. Benjamin believes in Mateo. Generous Benjamin never unjustly got angry or raised his voice at Mateo. Perhaps that's why Mateo grew up to be a considerate and gentle boy, without the usual teenage rebelliousness. And that's what I thought. At least, that's what I believed. I still have faith in him, but I can't shake off my anxiety about what lies ahead. We've set the wedding date. I want to talk about it, so we'll come over tomorrow. Benjamin and I, as usual, welcomed Matteo and Grace into our home. As we sat around the dining table, it was Matteo who did all the talking, just like always. "Here, Matteo," I said, placing a bank card and the PIN information in front of him on the table, which was in Matteo's name. "Use this for the wedding." I had created this account when I divorced. It was my resolve to protect Matteo no matter what, slowly saving money for him. Benjamin knew about this account too, and after we remarried, he suggested, should we put in a fixed amount every month? But by then, Matteo already had an education insurance plan, and we were making monthly payments for it. Additionally, this savings account was more like a personal satisfaction for me, funded by my allowance, so there were times when I couldn't deposit money if funds were tight. Even so, I had reached the goal of $20,000 I had set when I opened the account. So, I thought this was the right time to give it to Matteo. When Matteo received the bank card, he opened the PC and checked the account. "For the only son's big day in this house, only $20,000? Those were the words that came out of Matteo's mouth. Grace was also peering into the contents of the account shown on the screen from the side. "If you're a parent, you should be able to pay the full amount, you pauper." Matteo sneered with a twisted mouth. Grace, too, had the same expression. As for me, my mind went blank. Was Matteo, standing right in front of me, really my son? I didn't expect him to cry with joy or anything. I just thought it would be good for Matteo to use it.
Shut up, boy!
There was a loud bang on the table and a roar. It was Benjamin. Matteo and Grace, sitting opposite, were startled and froze, and so was I. Benjamin had never raised his voice like this before. "It's a good time to say this now. There's no blood relation between me and Matteo."
Huh?
Matteo uttered a foolish voice in surprise. It's understandable. We never mentioned it before, and I didn't expect Benjamin to reveal it at this moment. "I've been with Matteo since he was 2 years old, and when he was 3, Mila and I remarried, becoming a family with Matteo." Matteo was speechless, with a stunned expression. Mila divorced her former husband to protect Matteo. Benjamin knew everything. He saw all the records of negotiations with the government officials for the divorce, the medical reports and photos of injuries, and pictures of the damaged house. Mila, even when injured by her husband's violence, always protected Matteo, making sure you weren't hurt. She divorced for that reason when you were 1 year old. The ex-husband ran away without paying alimony or child support. He never bothered to contact Matteo. That was unforgivable. Mila worked hard for Matteo's sake, creating this savings account. Even after marrying me, Mila saved in this account from the money she could freely use. There was hardly any surplus. I considered this savings account as a form of self-satisfaction, fulfilling my solitary parental heart by doing something for Matteo. After marrying Benjamin, our financial situation eased. We were no longer worried about daily food expenses. Could buy necessary school supplies when needed. And even managed to get educational insurance. We were able to pay the tuition fees without delay. All thanks to Benjamin. But Matteo is my child, born to me. I wanted to do something for him. Though I'm not related to Matteo by blood, I love him dearly as my son. I truly believe that. To me, Benjamin and Matteo are like a real father and son. But separately, Mila loves Matteo. It's incomparable to me. I think it's nonsensical even to compare. Hearing it spelled out feels a bit embarrassing. But that's how it is. Matteo is more important to me than my own life. I've felt this way ever since he was in my womb, unchangingly.
And yet, what did you say earlier? Say it again. I'm sorry.
When Benjamin pressed him with a loud voice, Matteo apologized just as loudly. Really, I'm sorry. That's right, I vaguely remember. The old apartment we lived in when I was little, and when we moved out of there. He remembers. Even though we lived there only until he was 3. When I married Benjamin, we moved to a bigger apartment. I'm sorry, thank you, Mom. And thank you too, Dad. Looking us straight in the eye, Matteo's words revealed the kind and unchanged face of my son. I'm really sorry. I'll think it over again. We'll plan a wedding that we can manage together.
Wait a minute.
It was Grace who interrupted, speaking up for the first time in front of us.
We're not changing the plan. I actually want to add more options. I have so many things I want to do.
Yelling at Mateo, her demeanor was a complete 180 degrees change from the demure image she had presented. Selfish, hysterical, and self-centered.
You live so modestly, you must have saved more. It's your son's wedding, you should contribute.
She then turned her fury on me. Although I wasn't surprised, hearing her words again confirmed she was indeed outrageous. After sighing, I decided to speak my mind.
As Mateo said earlier, shouldn't you consider within the range of your savings and the money I gave? Are you kidding me? A wedding so poor is worse than not having one at all.
Well, then maybe you shouldn't have one.
No way. If there's no wedding, then there's no point in getting married.
It was completely illogical. I wondered how to make her listen.
How much is the current estimate for the wedding? $160,000. What? How much can you two contribute?
Suddenly, Grace stopped talking. She shifts her gaze to Mateo.
I can only manage $20,000.
Grace says it's impossible for her.
If your family is wealthy, why not ask them for support? Grace's parents have said they won't give any money. She said they told her she should understand why.
Weren't they a wealthy family? Yet, they refused to contribute to their daughter's wedding. Benjamin and I exchanged puzzled looks, both tilting our heads in confusion. Eager to hear the reason, all three of us stared at Grace, who made a face as if she had bitten into a sour grape. Grace.
It's impossible.
Why?
I overspent a little.
On what? Dad's card. In response to Mateo's questions, Grace gradually explained. To summarize, Grace had been given a family credit card by her father, which she used for shopping as if it were her allowance. However, her spending became increasingly extravagant, and she maxed out the credit card limit. Her parents were furious when they found out. Realizing they had spoiled her too much, they decided not to give her any more money, regardless of the situation, and to make her experience earning her own money. They managed to get her a job at the same company as Mateo through family connections. Nevertheless, it seems Grace hasn't saved any money at all. Living at home, Grace shouldn't be paying any living expenses, but it seems hard for her to break the habit of spending money like water. Under these circumstances, her parents have decided not to contribute financially to her wedding. It seems they believe this will continue until Grace develops a more typical sense of money management, but for now, they think it's impossible.
So, $160,000 is out of the question then. That's why Mateo's family should just pay for it.
Mateo pressed his forehead weakly and murmured, but Grace, on the other hand, confronted him loudly.
I told you. I can't marry someone who doesn't share my financial values. If you don't have money, there's no point in being married. I have no use for a poor person.
Seems like you're the poorest here, Grace.
What did you say?
Grace became furious at Mateo's honest remark. It must have been the last thing she wanted to hear.
You go around calling other people's families poor, but it's not funny that you're actually the poorest.
Anyway, let's apologize properly.
Of course, I have to apologize too. If you don't have money, I don't need you. I'm getting a divorce.
Grace's attitude seemed like nothing but whining, and Mateo's responses were becoming duller. I guess it must be tiring when the conversation isn't going anywhere. Why did you marry Mateo, Grace? I decided to ask what I wanted to know. It seems she can answer questions.
I wanted to marry someone from the same company.
Why someone from the same company?
If you marry someone from the same company, you can quit your job, right?
I see. It was common in the past. Women often used to quit their jobs when they married a coworker. I wonder if that culture still exists in Mateo and Grace's company.
I don't want to work anymore. If I get married, I can quit. I can't quit right now because of the wedding guests, but I'll quit right after the wedding.
It feels like something's wrong, but at least I understood that Grace's parents' feelings are not getting through to her. It's quite unfortunate. And why did you always whisper to Mateo and let him do the talking? I was simply curious. I couldn't understand why she did that.
Because I didn't want to talk to someone who seemed poor. I didn't want to get tainted by poverty. Besides, they'll listen if it's their son talking.
I was oddly impressed to realize that there really are people who say things like this. At this point, it seems beyond redemption. Grace, can you explain this? I took an envelope from the shelf behind me, spread its contents on the table, and addressed Grace. There were several photos. In all of them, Grace was pictured, but she was arm in arm or embracing men other than Mateo. Moreover, each man was different.
Grace, what's this about? I want to know what this is about, too.
Grace was taken aback by Mateo's question. But I wasn't going to let it go.
This is evidence of your affair, isn't it? What? Did you hire a detective or something? Spot on.
I remembered hearing Grace say to Mateo, "Divorce if you don't cut ties with your family." I wondered why she was so quick to threaten divorce. The difference between her behavior in front of us and in private was too great, so I simply thought it was suspicious. That's why I hired a detective to investigate her behavior, including infidelity. And it was a hit. Or should I say, a miss. She appeared to be involved with several men, hiding the fact that she was married.
Are you keeping these men around to get gifts from them? Exactly. If I can't buy it myself, I have to get someone else to buy it for me. Is there a need to go to hotels? Shut up! It's none of your business.
Grace seemed reckless, not even trying to hide anything.
It does concern me.
Mateo spoke in a low voice. Grace visibly flinched, but she quickly regained composure and glared at Mateo with a sharp look.
We're getting a divorce.
Of course.
I'll be asking for alimony too. Why? You should be able to figure that out.
Mateo glared back at her. At the firmness of Mateo's stance, Grace seemed to be at a loss for words and stood up abruptly.
I'm leaving. I can't stand this anymore.
And with that, Grace stomped out, her footsteps echoing as she left. We heard the front door close, and we all let out a big sigh. Afterward, Mateo and Grace's divorce was finalized without a hitch. Although Mateo demanded alimony, the likelihood of it being paid in full was slim. More pressing was the debt incurred from the expensive bags and shoes Grace had insisted on when they got married. Grace was the primary debtor, but Mateo had unfortunately become a cosigner. Given the current situation, it looked like Grace was heading towards bankruptcy, which meant all the debt repayment would fall on Mateo's shoulders. Moreover, as a cosigner, he could be asked to pay it all at once. Consulting a lawyer, it seemed manageable through debt restructuring, so that was the plan. Even though they were divorced, the obligation to repay the debt didn't disappear. It's a sad story, paying off a huge debt for a woman he didn't even love, but it's an expensive lesson learned. All I did was have a lawyer send letters to Grace's various flings. The letter implied, "Looks like you might be liable for the debt Grace accumulated during her marriage. Are you okay with that, considering the affair?" This revealed Grace's misdeeds to her flings, who then came to the office demanding repayment for all they'd spent, causing a commotion that made the company aware of the situation. Furthermore, it came to light that Grace had been making fraudulent expense claims at work, leading to her termination. Abandoned by her family, Grace now lives alone in a cheap, old apartment, seemingly in a depressive state.
I'm home.
Welcome back. Dinner's ready soon.
Yay! I'm gonna wash my hands.
After his divorce, Mateo started visiting home occasionally, spending time with the family like before. Truth be told, I was pretty upset about the whole situation with Mateo and had thought about banning him from the house for a while. But when Mateo came to our house alone after everything, he deeply apologized, saying, "I'm truly sorry." His apology didn't mean everything was forgiven, but I still had some anger. "It's okay. Mila and we both love you, Mateo." Benjamin said this with a big smile, so I couldn't stay mad any longer. And things felt normal again.
Is the debt repayment done?
Yeah, managed with my savings. I'm broke now, though. You did well to pay it off, Mateo. I turned pale every time I remembered it. But well, it's a lesson learned from my own mistakes. We chatted over dinner, and Mateo managed a wry smile. Despite the tough times he'd been through, accepting and overcoming his mistakes, seeing him able to talk about it like this made me feel that my son had grown as a person.
Mom, is there more food?
Sure is. Living with just Benjamin and occasionally having Mateo come over, I felt happy that the three of us could spend time together, just like before.